Welcome back to McCarthy Performance. In this video we will be doing some Brian Tooley rods. We're going to finish up on them. We're going to start on another set of connecting rods, and you know, it rains. When it rains it pours. It seems like I got another set of rods to do. So we're going to start on these big block Chevrolet truck rods, and they're 3/8 connecting rod. Pretty much standard rod in most all big block Chevrolets, unless you had something high performance and real special, but these actually are decent rods. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Okay, these are the dowel locators. You can see there's a couple threads in there, not very many. So I'm going to deburr these. I'm going to flip them around. I'm going to drive them from the other side. I'm going to break this edge a little bit here and here and inside. So we're going to do this with the die grinder. What that's going to ensure is that there's no burrs hanging off of that dowel inside when I tapped it. So when I brush it all out and clean it all out, it'll be no metal or anything hanging off of there that could possibly get caught up in the threads. Okay, so we got the caps deburred. I've taken the dowels and I've cleaned them up. And I've cleaned them up, so I'm going to take the part that I threaded right there. I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to drive it into the cap. Now the way that I do this, this one might need to be chamfered just a little bit more. We'll try this one. This one looks like it'll go fine. So take a little socket, set it there. I start pressing it in. Okay, this is the same thickness of where it needs to stop, although usually it'll stop. There's a shoulder in there, it'll usually deadhead in the shoulder. So that's how I do it. Let's see if I can convince that one to start. Okay, we're gonna have to deburr that one a little better. Sometimes when you tap it, it'll flare up a little bit. What I do is I use a deep well. That happens to be a 1/4 inch drive. It's a Craftsman and it's a 7mm. It slides right up on there. I fire up the stem grinder on the valve grinder and I just give it a spin and break that high spot off of it. And it'll start easy. Pretty much wanting to center itself now. You know, of course, you want to make sure you drive it straight. And they go right in. So this is number 5, and this is number 5. Go right on. Okay, we got the Brian Tooley rods all torqued up. We're going to rough the rods in with the diamonds. I'm going to take it up to about 1,000ths, and then I'll go to vitrified and finish up. So we'll get going on them. We have all the rods roughed in. They should be pretty close to thousandths still in them that I got to take out. That's 1 1/10. I let them cool a little bit. They do move a little bit. One's 1 1/2. So I'm going to switch over to vitrified now. That's one. We'll switch over to vitrified and finish them up. 1 1/10. This one's 2. I'll take a little bit more out of that one. Well, 1. It's jumping around because it's pretty aggressive, the diamond. It'll be a lot truer, smoother finish, so it won't jump around as much. This one, we'll take a little bit more out of that one. Same with that one. They moved a little after they cooled off. Same with this one. So I got 4 of them here. I'll take a little bit more out of. Then we'll get to the finish on them, and that'll probably be it on them rods. We'll get going on roughing a little bit more out of them, and then we'll get to a finished stone. Okay, I've got a precision ground piece of steel here with some stick-it paper on it, 80 grit. I'm just gonna lightly go over the sides of the rods. Make sure there's no high spots or nothing hanging up on them. That looks good. We're going to wash them one more time. Check them again. Okay, we've got the sides of the rods sanded. We've washed the rods. We got them all clean. We're going to check them one more time, and if they need a little tune-up, we're going to do it right now. That one's 0. That one's 0. That one's 0. We got a 10th right at the parting line almost, which is nothing. Be hard pressed to see these rods any better when they were new. 0. 0. 0. 0. Maybe half a tenth. Want to get picky. 0. Okay, so we're pretty much done. We'll make sure there's no magnetic field in the rods. That one's got a little bit of field in it, so we'll take the field out of them. So we got the rods all washed up. We're all checked. They look as good as they'll ever be. Come out exceptionally nice. Nice finish. Everything's good. Within less than a tenth of a thousandth of an inch. We're going to start on reconning a set of big block Chevrolet rods, 3/8 rods. Now, I lost count at about 4 different versions of the 3/8 rod. There's quite a few of them actually, and they're all pretty decent. The rods that we prefer, or at least back in the day before you could get a import rod, was the truck rod, or what we called the thumb rod. So we called them thumb rods because you could put your thumb right there, and they have a little more material there than, let's say, a 402 rod. And it just so happened that some of the 454s came with that rod, some of them came with that rod. So that's what we always called them. They're both a 3/8 bolt rod, and they'll both hold a fair amount of power done right. And of course, this is just for quick reference. This is a new style. This is a 7/16 rod. It's 7/16 rod bolts. They made it I think in like 4 different versions. This would be the newer style. It's a thinner beam than the older style. The older style, they came 7/16 pressed and 7/16 dipped, tin dipped, floating pin, and then they had them in a couple other versions. So please don't write to me about them. I've been around these things all my life, but we don't use them anymore because it almost costs the amount to buy a set of import rods it is does properly rebuild them. Now I'm going to go through the steps of rebuilding some big block Chevrolet connecting rods, but this pretty much applies to any connecting rod. First, what we're going to go into is we're going to want to make sure we have acceptable cores. We want to make sure that there's enough material on the top of the pads that when we balance them, that we're not going to get into a problem. So if this rod is in this bunch and this rod's came out of an engine, which is not uncommon for GM to be 6 grams 4 grams off, if this ends up being a heavier rod with that up at the top, there's nothing you can do versus one of these. So you always kind of want to make sure that you weigh them all and make sure that you don't get into a situation where this rod ends up being the heaviest, out of a bunch and you can't take no material off the top, if that makes any sense. And of course, you want to kind of check the pads. So the best thing to do is to weigh them all. But before we get into weighing them all, if it's going to be a press pin, I always check the housing bores first and make sure that they're not oversized, they're not marginal. And if they're marginal, then I'll be looking for another rod. Marginal means that they are at a thousandths before I even touch them. If I check them and I'm going to use it as a press and it doesn't have a thousandths worth of press in it, chances are I'm going to be looking for another rod. It's not uncommon to be getting a set of rods and having something like this show up where there's nothing you can do to make this rod any lighter at the top end. And so at that point, you have to determine if you want to juggle pistons around and play around with weight, or you can accept the amount that it will be off and try to match weight it. Try to get it as close as you can. So after you get done checking the rods and making sure that there's enough material and you weigh the big end and the small end, and you got a set that are decent. Of course, this is going to require some equipment, but obviously this will at least give you an idea what you go through doing a set of rods, or at least I do. So once we have got 8 good rods, we're going to determine what bolt we want to use. Now, don't ask me why, but big block Chevrolets seem that they have a problem with the bolts falling out of them. This rod here is just an extra rod, and you can see that the bolt's halfway out of the rod already. And it just seems like that hole, that tolerance, they can't control it very well. I've seen guys do some pretty creative things in the past to hold the bolt, but basically it's a through bolt. So it's going through the rod. So all of this has to do is basically go into the rod. It should center. Having it loose does not necessarily guarantee that the top of the rod will line up every time with the cap. Now, if you've got one that's pressed in, you might get by and it might kind of be close and it'll probably work. But if you're going to waste your time, you're wasting your time if you don't do it right. So you want at least a good set of rods. Now, there's a couple ways you can cure that problem. One of the easiest ways that I found is, and they seem to be a little bit, they go on a little bit tougher, is you've got a knurled bolt. This is what GM pretty much uses, okay? And then you have a wave lock. And these are ARP. And the wave locks seem to be pretty decent. And here's another set of 7/16 just for an example. And you see this one on the side. This would be like the old boron bolts that GM used to use in the 7/16 high performance rods. And they had no knurl on them. And the reason being on the knurl is, and I've never seen one fail, is you're introducing stress risers into the fastener. So that's a lot of reasons why you'll see a bolt like this, or you'll see a bolt like this. Now, pretty much all the aftermarket rods have gone to cap screw, and that's basically the rod is threaded. So the bolts go up through the rod. So once you've determined what rod bolts you use, and I prefer to use ARPs, the wave locks, in the big block Chevrolets, because if you've got a whole set of them that are kind of like I've told you, you got no pad on the top and there's no pad on the bottom, and they're all kind of Mickey Mouse, and that happens, you might need a couple different rods. And if the bolts are all loose in them, you might just want to find another set of rods. And at that point, honestly, it's probably just better just to go out and buy a set of aftermarket rods. But a lot of guys want the original stuff in their engines. They don't want Chinese rods. You can buy American rods, and there's very nice ones out there, and they have a very nice price on them. So we'll get back to the rods. So when you get done with your rods and picking out a good set, and you're about ready to recondition them or send them off to get them reconditioned, the guy that's doing it, you want to make sure that, now this is a standard bolt and it fits kind of tight up against the cap. Well, sure that the shoulder of the nut does not ride up against the radius cut into the cap, because if it's up high, it's not interfacing with the whole face of the fastener, and you can have real serious problems. So you want to go in and spot face that, and that's what we're going to do here shortly. So you've seen me check pin fit before. So basically set the sewing machine up for the wrist pin, and with a wrist pin vise, and then you check to see how much interference you'll have. If I have, I will do that after we spot face the caps for the flange nuts. We will. I will set up the sunning, and I will show you what to look for. So we'll get to spot facing these. Okay, I jumped ahead a little bit on these rods, and I didn't video it because I didn't think anybody would want to listen to an air compressor. So I used my bead blasting cabinet, and I went over and I bead blasted the rods. And prior to that, I balanced them. So the rods are pretty much all balanced right now. And they're set to go. Obviously, I checked these before I did any of the work, but I'm going to set it up really quick and show you, because it had pretty much already been set up. So this is our pin vise. You run it up tight and you back it off just a little bit. 1/8 to 1/4 turn, they say. Be honest with you, I don't back it off at all. So says we're a 1/10, so we'll set this up here. Oops. We'll check to see how much press we have, because if we're going to press them and we don't have no press, obviously there ain't no sense spending any time with them. Okay, this says I got 2 7/10 with a press, which is way too much. So that's fine though, because we can put that where we want. And minimum is 1/1000 press. People say that you can go to 1.5 with an oven and everything. I kind of like to be around 1 3/10 of the rod. But if you stick one of these, if you put one of these on and you stick it and you got to get it off, and you've got more than 1.5 thousandths on it, you better say a prayer, because chances are you're not going to get it off without destroying the rod, possibly the piston. So that's how we check for piston pin press. Oh, sorry about the heater running. It's just a cold day here at the shop. So we've got everything cleaned and spot faced, and I think this is where I'm going to stop on this video. I will press the bolts in these, fit the bolts, and hone them. Wrist pin end for fit, and the big end. So if you get any enjoyment out of my videos, please subscribe. We're getting really close to 500. I would like to see if we can gain a little bit more traction. If you enjoy the videos, please hit the like button. Thanks for watching.